Hi, I'm Jason, Retail Geek Goldberg. I'm going to talk to you about some of the major disruptions happening in the commerce space right now. So the real disruption of commerce over the last decade has been this emergence of digitally influenced sales and digital in the path to purchase. If you listen to earnings calls for a retailer like Walmart, for years they talked about their 4,700 stores. They talked about this happened in our 4,000 supercenters or this happened in our 700 club stores. You don't hear Doug McMillon talk about that anymore. Today on earnings call, Doug talks about his 50 million stores. And that's because there's 50 million consumers that have the Walmart app on the front page of their mobile phone and use that app every month to shop. So the front door of Walmart is no longer that supercenter, it's that supercomputer in the consumer's pocket. And that is the true disruption of commerce. So that digital disruption of commerce has had a number of interesting impacts in the overall commerce landscape. So I've picked three that I think are super important for you to be thinking about today. The first one is what I call the epic battle between brands and retailers. Now, that's not my phrasing. That's a much smarter person than me. That's Warren Buffett talking about the huge struggle between brands and retailers. And whenever I talk about this, particularly when I talk about this with a brand, they say, "Oh, Jason, that's private label. That's been going on for 60 plus years. That's kind of cooked into the economic model." And that's absolutely not what I'm talking about. What Warren's talking about, what I'm talking about, is something beyond private label that I'll call owned brands. So let me help clarify the difference for you. Private label would be if you had a meeting and at the end of that meeting, you had a really loudmouth retail geek speaker come and yell at you for half an hour. And during that talk, you very likely would develop a headache. So immediately after that meeting, you'd probably go to Walgreens and try to get some ibuprofen for your headache. And there on the shelf in Walgreens, right next to that Advil, is Walbuprofen, Walgreens private label Advil. And if you weren't clear what the value proposition was for that private label product, it's printed right on the box, compare to Advil. So what was the marketing for Walbuprofen? Were there any television commercials? Were there store decals? Were there things like that? No, there weren't. The exclusive marketing for Walbuprofen is it's on the shelf next to Advil, and it's the same benefit at a slightly lower price. That's what private label has historically been. But now I want you to think about something a lot different than that. I want you to think about retailers that are using their customer intimacy, their huge first-party data, to develop products that the consumer likes better than national brands in many cases, or has a preference for. So think about some of the popular Amazon products, like the Kindle or the Echo. Are these private label Sony Bluetooth speakers? No. They're a unique product that had a much stronger value proposition in the market than the products it replaced. And think about the marketing behind a product like that Echo. Amazon is the 7th busiest website in the United States of America, and they dedicate 50% of the pixels on that website to selling their owned brand. They bought a chain of grocery stores, and what was the pick of the season? It wasn't bananas, it was that Amazon Echo. One of their biggest competitors is Best Buy. They rent space from every Best Buy to have a shop-in-shop to promote their own brand products. And of course, they hired Ellen DeGeneres, Harrison Ford, Michael B. Jordan, and Anthony Hopkins to sell it during the Super Bowl. So that's an example of a retailer using their customer intimacy to make a product that consumers liked better than the previous national brands. Think about a retailer like Target. Here's 11 brands that Target's invented in the last 5 years that all sell over $1 billion GMV just in the United States of America. Several of these brands sell over $5 billion GMV. Think about a product like Cat & Jack that sells much better than, for example, Baby Gap, a previous national brand. This is because Target has data on 60 million guests that come to their store every week, and they get to type search results into the search browser, and Target sees those searches. They see what products the consumers like. They see what products consumers look at and don't buy, what they buy and return, and what they buy and keep. And it helps them develop more popular products that moms prefer to the previous national brands. Let me introduce you to the best-selling SKU at Trader Joe's. This is the rolled corn tortilla chips, chili and lime flavored. Is this a knockoff of a Dorito? No. It's a complete unique flavor profile and formulation that Trader Joe's invented that their customers prefer to a national brand. And it's the best-selling SKU in the store. Think about a retailer like Walmart that rolled out Better Goods this year and all the interesting value propositions based on their 190 million consumers that shop their store every week. A really interesting one to me is Kroger. Kroger has the best-selling organic food brand in the United States of America. It's called Simple Truth. Kroger's global expansion strategy is not to open retail stores in Brazil. It's to sell Simple Truth on Tmall in China. In China, Kroger is not a retailer. They're a premium Western food brand. And so they're building their own brands, and their global expansion strategy is to sell those brands, not to be a retailer, right? And of course, you can't talk about own brands without talking about Kirkland from our friends at Costco. Kirkland is a $80 billion brand. It's bigger than Unilever. It's bigger than Nike. Gartner came out with a study this year that said that by 2029, they expect 50% of all retail sales to be own brands. I guarantee you, as a result of digital disruption and the strain on margins that's put on every retailer in America has a strategy to sell more of their higher margin own brands over the national brands. And what that means is national brands are going to be competing for a shrinking shelf. There's less shelf space available, and it's going to be more important than ever that the national brands win the hearts and minds of consumers before they ever walk in a retail store. So this is a complete disruption of the traditional commerce model. The next disruption I want to talk about is what I call the disruption of discovery. So I'm a fourth generation retailer. I've been doing this for over 30 years. And for my entire career, the greatest source of leads in any retail store is called SIS, Saw in Store. I walked into a store for Oreos, and there on the shelf next to those Oreos were the pumpkin spice Oreos, which are delicious, by the way. I discovered them, I decided to take them home and try them, and I loved them. Procter & Gamble, of course, invented a name for that moment. They called it the first moment of truth. And shopper marketing is really based on this fundamental insight from Procter & Gamble. So that is really how all retail has worked, is winning that first moment of truth and then continuing down the purchase funnel. For those of you that know me, you know that I have a horrible addiction to Starbucks coffee. Oh, and that's a great excuse to take a sip. But I want you to think about my customer experience shopping for coffee. If I walk into a Target, I have to walk by 38 other brands of coffee before I get to my beloved Starbucks section. All of these brands have a chance to catch my attention, to conquest me, to create a first moment of truth with me before I get to my traditional Starbucks purchase. And once I get to that Starbucks section, Starbucks has an opportunity to tell me about all their new products before I buy the product that I would typically buy, right? And that is how that first moment of truth has always worked. Only one problem. Does anyone watching this believe that that is how I buy coffee? Of course not, right? What am I more likely to do? I'm more likely to type Starbucks coffee into that Target search engine, and look what Target does. It parachutes me right to the traditional products that I always buy from Target. That it's that iced coffee that I put in my refrigerator so I can drink it while I'm working from home. And I miss that chance for serendipitous discovery. I miss that chance for conquesting. I miss that first moment of truth. And I went back to what I always buy from Target. But increasingly, this isn't even how people discover coffee. Do you know how people discover new coffee today? The TikTok, right? This is a video that went viral a couple years ago on TikTok. And essentially, an influencer took some Folgers instant coffee, they put it in a cup with sugar, with hot water, they emulsified it with like a blender, and then they pour it over ice, and it creates this creamy, caramely, sweet, delicious caffeine concoction. And the week this video went viral, 10 other influencers made other videos. The first one was seen 6 million times. Cumulatively, this collection of video was seen over 60 million times. And I got a panic call from Walmart. We are sold out of instant coffee nationwide, and we have no idea why, right? So that first moment of truth became a zero moment of truth on TikTok. And think about what happened there. You had this huge spike in interest. You had this huge spike in demand. And as good and renowned as the Walmart supply chain is, do you think Walmart could get a restock of instant coffee nationwide in a week? They couldn't. And by the time they did restock instant coffee, this Protect Your trend had played out, right? So this was a lost opportunity. All this demand was created organically on social before a customer ever walked in a store. But the traditional retail model didn't have a good way to capitalize on that demand, right? And this has played out every week since then with some product in some category. Think about a product category like sunscreen. I recently planned a vacation to Hawaii with my family, so I sort of have sunscreen on the mind. And this is the traditional experience you'd have for sunscreen. Can anyone watching this tell what the good sunscreen is from this picture? Of course you can't, right? Even if I took all the sunscreens out and squirted them in your hand, could you tell which one worked better? Could you tell which one was reef safe? No, of course not, right? So increasingly, this is not the tool set that consumers use when they land at a selection and a loyalty for sunscreen. They're way more likely to listen to Dr. Derm on TikTok, right? And he'll tell you exactly what sunscreen. And it turns out it's a non-FDA approved sunscreen from South Korea. Who knew? But ever more, it's not even just these social networks and these influencers. It's the LLMs. It's the artificial intelligence. So what happens when I type into ChatGPT, hey ChatGPT, what sunscreen should I buy for my vacation to Hawaii with my 9-year-old son? And it tells me what criteria I should care about and what 3 popular sunscreens are that meet that criteria, right? And so it's doing a lot of the discovery and consideration for me and taking me right to that bottom of the funnel. But as interesting as ChatGPT is, and there's rumors that they're forming a partnership with Shopify right now, they don't really have an end-to-end commerce experience on the OpenAI platform today. However, Perplexity, a competitor of ChatGPT, does. So when I ask Perplexity that same search, I get a very similar result. I get a set of criteria that should be important to me in picking a sunscreen. It should be waterproof, it should be reef safe, it should not sting your eyes. And then it's going to recommend some sunscreens that best meet that criteria. But unlike ChatGPT, Perplexity is actually going to give me links to the retailer's product detail pages where I could buy those products. And if I scroll down, for some products, it doesn't just give me a link. It gives me a buy now on Shopify button. So I can conduct transactions right here. And increasingly, it bypasses Shopify, and Perplexity becomes the commerce engine of choice. And Perplexity will sell me the sunscreen direct and ship it to my house. So Perplexity isn't just a search engine competitor. Perplexity is a commerce marketplace competitor that's competing with Amazon and Mercado Libre and Alibaba with a better discovery experience and the ability to consummate the transaction right on the platform. And what's really interesting is now you can take these LLMs into the retail store with you, and they can actually see through their camera.
Hey ChatGPT, I'm at the grocery store. I need to buy some beer for a really important party. I don't know anything about beer, but my friends are really into craft beers. What do you see on this shelf that I should specifically buy?
Hey Drake, I see a lot of craft beers. A mix pack might be a safe bet since it offers variety. If your friends like IPAs, something like a hazy IPA or a local favorite would be good. Any particular style your friends prefer?
I don't know. Which specific brand and variety do you think would be safest?
A safe bet would be a mixed variety variety pack from a well-known brewery like Sierra Nevada or New Belgium. They usually offer a range of styles that should please everyone.
Do you see either of those on the shelf?
Yeah, I see a Sierra Nevada pack on the middle shelf. That would be a great choice. It's got a nice variety.
Perfect, thanks very much.
You're welcome. Have fun at the party.
So I will have fun at the party, and in this case, ChatGPT helped me find this particular SKU on the shelf at my local grocery store. And so imagine a near future when consumers are going up and down the aisles of a grocery store, and they're asking ChatGPT which floor cleaner is going to be best for their hardwood floors, or which shampoo is going to work best with their dry, thin hair type, or which sunscreen is going to be best for them to take on their vacation. All of these things are going to be playing out on a regular basis. I want to give one more example of how much opportunity for commerce we can unlock on these social networks. And this is a case study of one of my favorite products, the Stanley tumbler. And for those of you who are watching, you may not know this, but Stanley was originally a tool company. They made things called hammers that craftsmen used at work to do their job. And many of those craftsmen had to bring their lunch to work. And so Stanley started making a thermos for craftsmen to carry their lunch to work in. And in about 2017, 2018, they had an interesting idea. I wonder if we could sell thermoses to people that don't use tools for a living. They went to this chief marketing officer at the time for Crocs. And the chief marketing officer at Crocs said, absolutely, we can sell Stanley thermoses to people that don't use tools for a living. We just need to make them in a variety of bright colors. And so the CMO of Crocs became the CEO of the Stanley Beverage Company. Stanley spun off a separate direct-to-consumer company and launched the Stanley tumbler. And by 2019, it was already a reasonable success. They sold $73 million of tumblers, which is a total reasonable success for a one-product company. However, that's not the end of the story. This story changes because of a woman named Danielle Lettering. And for those of you that aren't familiar, Danielle was driving to work one day and something awful happened to her. Her car spontaneously combusted into flames on the freeway. So don't panic. She pulled over. She safely got out. She called emergency services. They put out the fire. They towed her car to a lot. The next day they called and invited her to come to the lot and get her possessions out of the car. So she came. Her boyfriend came with her and videoed as she's going through this terrifying burnt out vehicle to get her possessions. And look what's in the cup holder of her car. And you can't hear it, but do you know what she's hearing right now? Ice. There is still fresh ice in the Stanley tumbler in the burnt out car. And remember that CMO of Crocs, who's now the CEO of the Stanley Tumbler Company? He sees this video on TikTok and he responds perfectly. He responds, "Thank God you're okay, Danielle. We got you. We're going to buy you a new car." A Mazda, not a Kia, by the way. So one lesson is, let's not be Kia in this story. But the other lesson is that there's incredible opportunity to unlock in social, that we're all sitting around in our national sales meetings talking about how the industry is growing at 4%, but we have a really ambitious goal to grow 10%. And yet, if we were so lucky as to have a Danielle Lettering moment for our product, we might have 1,000% growth. In 2023, Stanley Tumbler sold $750 million of Stanley thermoses. And so my lesson here is not that we should all try to go viral. You can't do that on purpose. My lesson is there is huge demand to unlock in the world, if only we can figure out how to reach those consumers and tell them about the unique benefits and attributes of our product. And this is why people are leaning into social discovery. As you may know, Unilever has a new CEO and he's announced a bold move. He's going to increase his marketing budget, but he's going to take 50% of that marketing budget and invest it in micro-influencers. Why? Because he feels like what Unilever says about Unilever is no longer credible, and that what he really needs is a trusted influencer in every zip code on the earth talking about Unilever and establishing that Danielle Lettering moment on a micro level. Again, Going viral and reaching millions of consumers all at once is very hard to do on purpose. But having an army of 20,000 influencers that can each credibly reach 1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 people can absolutely be done on purpose. And so this is this huge disruption to the first moment of truth as discovery is starting to move to all these digital tools. And the last disruption that I want to talk about is what we're now calling agentic commerce. And essentially, I want to give you an example of what this might be. So far, I've given you a lot of advice during this talk, but you should take it all with a grain of salt. I'm wrong all the time, and very little of it's based on science. But one thing I can tell you is you should stay hydrated. The human body needs water, and ideally, you should drink water that's not poisonous, right? So many of us that have taken that advice probably have one of these Brita water filter pitchers in our refrigerator at home. And do you know the official way you know if you need to replace the filter in a Brita water pitcher? You walk by a giant stack of water filters at Costco and go, oh shoot, I've never replaced the filter in my pitcher, right? And for years, that worked for auto replenishment. That in-store moment of truth reminded customers to buy that item they needed to replenish their pantry. And Costco and Sam's and many others sold lots of water filters. But then Amazon invented this very clever customer experience called subscribe and save. And the moment they rolled it out, we all said, oh my God, replenishment commerce is over. Amazon has won. Everyone's going to subscribe to all these products. They're going to magically show up, and the consumer's never going to have to think about it again. And that's exactly what happened. Subscribe and save became super relevant. Every brand had to pay extra fees to get in the subscribe and save program, and consumers started subscribing to all these replenishment items. But after about a year, those subscription sales started to curtail and even go down. Do you know why? Because we all ended up with a closet full of Brita water filters that we never got around to putting in the pitcher. We all developed subscription fatigue and we all canceled our subscriptions. So Amazon's a very clever company. You know what they did in response to that? They said, hey, I've got you. Take this button and glue it to your refrigerator. And every time you push it, we'll bring you a water filter. And that was interesting. It got some buzz for a little while. It turns out consumers don't want to glue buttons to the refrigerator. And of course, Amazon doesn't even offer these dash buttons today. Do you know why? Because today, the darn water filter has Wi-Fi built right into the pitcher, and it orders its own consumables. It orders its own filters, so the consumer never needs to think about it anymore. So if you were selling at Walmart, you probably know the Garcias, the busy family, the main persona at Walmart. And think about this. She's not who's buying that Brita water filter. It's an NVIDIA microchip inside of that water filter. And that microchip has totally different criteria than the Garcias. That microchip is probably going to run a reverse auction for the cheapest provider that meets the specs for the water filter it needs. And it's probably not going to care about fast delivery because it knows weeks in advance that it needs to be replaced. And so this is a fundamental disruption of retail. And think about how much of retail, how much of that center of store at a Kroger or Walmart is dedicated to these kind of replenishment items. I spent a significant portion of my career at Best Buy. And we wanted, back then TVs were profitable to sell. We wanted to sell you a TV. But consumers didn't shop for TVs very often, and so they wouldn't visit the store very often. So we dedicated 10,000 square feet in the middle of the Best Buy store to sell Spotify playlists that used to come on these plastic circles called CDs. So the 10,000 square feet in the middle of a Best Buy store was dedicated to music, and customers would come every week to buy new music, and they would occasionally walk by the Magnolia Hi-Fi section and maybe buy a premium new TV. So that the CDs were the traffic driver replenishment item for Best Buy. But what happened when Spotify started beaming that playlist to every home in America and no one ever walked into a Best Buy for a plastic circle again? It almost put Best Buy out of business. A really smart management team had to figure out what to do with that space. They rent a bunch of it to Amazon and they use a bunch of it to sell professional services. And that saved Best Buy. But the same thing is going to play out in grocery stores as consumers don't walk to the middle of the store to get paper towels, toilet paper, cleansing products, that the robots could potentially auto-replenish for consumers. We're starting to see retailers roll this out. Walmart at CES announced an auto-replenishment service for Walmart Plus customers that looks at everything you buy from Walmart and it puts items in your cart that it thinks you're going to need. And this idea of the robot not just doing a simple shopping task, but solving a complex shopping problem for the customer is called agentic AI. And the gentleman that invented that phrase is a professor at Stanford, Andrew Ng. He used to run AI for Google. He was People Magazine's most interesting man in the world in 2013 for his AI research. He coined the phrase AI agents. And if you're curious what Professor Ng is doing today, he's the newest board member at Amazon. So if you're wondering what Amazon's commerce strategy, you can bet agentic AI plays a significant role in it, right? And we're already starting to see the products launch, the Alexa Plus, the Amazon Buy For Me, where an agentic agent from Amazon will go to a direct-to-consumer website and buy a product on behalf of a customer, pay for it with Amazon's payment credentials when that direct-to-consumer company didn't want to sell their products direct on Amazon, right? So think about what this means. This doesn't mean, hey, agent, order more peanut butter for my kid's lunch. This means, hey, agent, never let me run out of ingredients for my kid's lunch again. And think about what that intelligent agent is going to do. It's going to say, Jason's kid goes to Chicago Public Schools, and here's his lunch schedule. And Jason shops for groceries at Walmart, and here are all the products he buys and how frequently he replenishes them. And Jason flies on United Airlines, and here's the vacations his family has planned when they won't need a lunch. And he rolls all that together and says, Jason's kid doesn't even eat peanut butter. His kid only eats pirate booty. So the agent's going to make sure that I never run out of pirate booty so that my kid doesn't yell at me in the morning when we're trying to get ready for school. And so that's another huge disruption. A big swath of products that people used to go shopping for are now just going to magically show up. We're going to lose the traffic in retail stores and have to reinvent what we do with that space. And we're going to lose the opportunity to help customers discover new versions of that product or conquest that product or have impulse purchases related to that product. And so that's the third of my three big disruptions that we're talking about today. The emergence of own brands, the disruption of discovery, and the emergence of agentic AI. Each one of these is super important. It's going to be more important as we go forward. They all were fundamentally triggered by the evolution of digital as part of the shopping experience. And I just want to tell you that I have great empathy for you as a marketer, thinking about a world in which all these changes are happening, in which our old playbook doesn't work as well as it once did, that we can't simply follow the instructions of our predecessor. I know exactly what it feels like to be that penguin slogging to the edge of that cliff, looking over that iceberg and thinking, wait, you're telling me I have to jump over that giant cliff to get into the ocean and do my migration? I get how scary that is. I get how intimidating that is. And I don't advise you to do it lightly because it doesn't always work out. Now, I want to assure you that no penguins were hurt in the presentation of this presentation. This scenario was generated by AI. But my point here is not that you need to all abandon SEO and abandon shopper marketing and abandon brick and mortar stores because of these new innovations. That likely would not turn out well. In general, first movers are very high risk. A professor at Wharton, Adam Grant, did a study, and 47% of all first movers fail. The first mover in search was Alta Vista. What I'm advising you to be is a fast follower, is to be ready as each of these trends reaches scale. To be thinking right now about how you're going to do your job differently when a significant portion of your customers replenish products with agentic AI, when they discover products products on social networks, when there's less shelf space available in the national brands as retailers focus on selling their own products more. That may mean doing pilots today. It may mean doing learnings. It almost certainly means getting your data governance in place. If you're a traditional brand and you don't have access to a lot of consumer data, you need to think about how you're going to get that voice of customer, that first party data to compete. And so those sort of foundational things you can do to be ready to be a fast follower are going to be highly important as we all live through this incredible disruption. I hope that gives you some food for thought. I'm super encouraged about the future. It just isn't going to look like the past. And until next time, happy commercing.